to me and asked me if I could minister to their bipolar sister or bipolar daughter, that's a form of grieving because you don't know how to help them. So you're grieving because you love them, but yet it's for some reason they don't change. So that's a different type of grieving when you have a daughter or a son that has mental illnesses. Or you can grieve someone who has run away. Like there's children that run away from their home and you can't find them, and sometimes you don't see them for years, and sometimes you'll never see them again. So you have to grieve over that loss. Some people have lost their children and they disappear, and they're wondering if they died or someone killed them, or so they're grieving until some of them get closure, but a lot of them don't.
Welcome to Flora. Get ready for empowering talk.
Welcome to the Flora Padilla Show. I am so glad you're with us today. Today I'm going to be speaking on grief, because we've all experienced grief one time or another in our lives. And a lady suggested that I speak on grief. In fact, it was my sister that said, "Can you speak on grief?" And I said, "I don't see why not." At first, I kind of hesitated, but then I thought about it and I said, "No, I can speak on grief because we've all have gone through grief." So anyway, I want to remind you of my 3 books. They're all sold at Amazon. These 2 I have. So the ones that told me they were going to buy the books, make sure that you call me, or if you want me to call you, I'll call you and remind you. But anyway, I'm going to speak on grief. And also, you can go to my website at mendingbrokenheartsministry.org. And if you have an idea or suggestion or anything, make sure you let me know. And also, please put a comment. I know some of you are doing it. I thank you for that. Or share it with somebody else, or just put like on the page. And that way I will continue giving messages on the emotion. And today, grief. Grief is mostly an internal, it's inside. It's an inside emotion. We sometimes handle it by crying, or we get depressed. But it stays, sometimes it stays on and on. Perhaps it never goes away, because I know of people that have lost their children, and I think that would be the hardest one. So I wouldn't be able to put myself in your place, because I can only tell you what I have experienced in my life when it comes to grief. It is that part that no one else can share or even fully understand, because it's a different kind of emotion. It is silent and lonely because it stays with you, affecting your moods and emotions with a feeling of loss and sadness. So those are things I know, like when I think about my mom, I think about where I can't talk to her anymore because she's gone. And then I think about my dad. He would call me, or I'd call him, and the same thing with my mom. But we can't even call him and talk to him anymore. Yeah, we could pretend, but it's not the same thing. And then I happened to also lose my dog that I had for 16 years. And that one, in every loss, you grieve different. Because I know I grieved different from my mom and my dad. See, my dad, I grieved a certain way, and my mom, I grieved a different way. And the reason was, especially my mom, because it was unexpected. So that one kind of didn't hit me right away until afterwards. And then my dog, she was with me every day for 16 years. Can you imagine? And then one day she gets sick, and the vet tells you there's not really much we could do for her. And right away, when the vet told me that, I got so emotional, and I was crying, and I called my son, and I was crying and just couldn't stop crying. So every loss we grieve differently, because it's a silent and lonely, because it stays with you. Why is grief such a silent and lonely emotion? Because when you lose a dad, you have a different relationship with your dad. When you lose your mom, you have a different relationship with your mom. And when you lose your dog, you have a different relationship with your dog. And also, I lost my two sisters, my two older sisters. So sometimes I was closer to one more than the other. But when the second to the oldest died before the older one died, I got closer to the older sister because my sister that's older than me, and then my sister that's older than my sister. Does that make sense? But anyway, they were very close. So when my sister died, we got close. So I noticed that when she died, I missed her more than my other sister. And I thought, how can that be when I was closer to my other sister? But it was because I spent a lot of time with her towards the end before she died. And I think that's why I grieved her more. So it just depends. And then age doesn't really have anything to do with anything, because my dad, I believe, and I might not be exact, but my dad was, I think, 72 when he died. And I think my mom she died 2 years later. So, I'm sorry, my mom died first, and she was 70. And then my dad died 2 years later, and he was 72. So my sisters, they were younger, and the one that died first was younger than my oldest sister. So to me, I don't think age really matters, but you know what they say, when you're getting older, you feel like you're getting closer to dying. But I have a friend that has a mom that's 101 years old, and I have another friend that has a mom, I think she's 89, and then my sister, her father-in-law is he's in his 90s, I think. So I don't think that age really has anything to do with dying. I think it just can happen to anybody, because my husband's mom died at the age of 24. So she was super young. My husband died at the age of 44. And so people die at different ages. So we don't ever say, well, I'm going to die because I'm turning whatever age. No, we don't know. We might last till we're 90. So we grieve for a while, or for a long time, or sometimes forever, because life is short. We have to live our life the best that we know how, because life is short. We don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow. So that's why we have to keep that in mind. A death by suicide. My friend lost her. In fact, two of my friends lost their son by suicide. A death. Some have lost their children, or their husbands, or their wife on drug overdose. So, and if you have dogs, I'm sure many of you have lost your dogs, because dogs don't last very long. But so that's a loss. Or maybe you had a miscarriage. So that's a different kind of loss. So maybe you lost your home. Some people have lost their home. You have to grieve that too. You grieve someone you did not know well. Sometimes you hear about somebody dying. Like now, we know Alex from Jeopardy. He just died today at the age of 80, and I got sad because I used to watch him on Jeopardy every day, every afternoon, and I even prayed for him as like I knew him, but I knew him from a distance, and I never got to know him. But I'm kind of grieving him today because because, I got used to seeing him in Jeopardy. So that's grieving for someone you don't know. And some people, I've seen people grieve for celebrities. When somebody dies, I remember when John Kennedy died, there's a lot of people grieving because they become like personal to you, especially if you like them and all that. So when they die, you take it hard and you grieve. Or sometimes you'll grieve someone you knew on Facebook. My brother-in-law just died I think it was last week, and I've been thinking about him every day. I think, wow, I didn't expect him to die. Not now. I don't know why, but I expected him to live way longer, but we don't know. So I've been kind of thinking about him every day, and I say, gosh, I remember where Andrew, he used to joke a lot. He was always joking, and he had names for everybody. So that's a different kind of grieving. Grieve the people that like, some people continue to grieve a person, and sometimes you over grieve them. Like, in other words, we need to know how to accept it. I guess it's always on accepting. That's how you're able to go forward. Sometimes I remember I had this elderly man that would come. Him and his wife would come to my support group. I remember that, and they were old. They were in their 87s, 88, but they always came to the support group because they felt like they were part of the family. And I remember asking her one day, because she said this was her second marriage, and she said she had been married to him for a long time. And I said, well, what happened to your first husband? She said, oh, I don't want to talk about that old goat. And I said, oh, you're bitter? And I thought, okay, she's 87 years old. How do I tell her that she needs to forgive the old goat? So she'd come in and she would share that she hated her ex-husband. And I would tell her, you know what? You're going to have to forgive him. And so every Tuesday she'd come in and she'd say the same thing. And I would have to keep telling her that she needed to forgive the old goat. So one day, it was on a Tuesday, she comes in and she raises up her hand and she says, can I share? Can I share? And I said, sure. She says, guess what? I forgave that old goat. And we just praised God and we're cheering for her and everything. And then that same week, that old goat died. Okay? So guess what? The following week, her husband, Mr. Alderete, he died. I had gotten so close to Mr. Alderete. In fact, for Christmas, he'd buy me something. Sometimes he'd give me a $50 bill. So he was there with us for a season. Oh, I took it so hard that when I started preaching that Sunday, I just started to weep because I was grieving him, because I knew I wasn't going to see him anymore. And I wasn't going to see her anymore either, because they used to come together. He used to drive her there. She never learned how to drive. And she would always tell me that she was related to Lucille Ball. I never really sat and talked to her about that, but she used to say that Lucille Ball was her cousin. So that was a loss of someone elderly that I knew and got attached to. Sometimes, because I've ministered to many people that have had AIDS, and I some of them made it and some of them didn't. But when they would die, I would feel a loss. Death of a partner in an extramarital affair. It's a loss. So you have to keep that in mind. And also, I just wanted to remind you, I'll finish this when we get back. Welcome back to the Flora Padilla Show. I'm going to continue where I left out, okay? I left out on that you grieve when you lose a job or when you leave a job. I had a friend that told me she had worked 50 years at her job, and I said 50 years, and she said she really didn't want to retire, but 50 years, it's time to retire. But she said that she felt a loss because she probably got very close to everybody there. So that's a loss when you lose your job or when you retire from your job or when you get divorced. I always feel that you have to grieve that divorce. You have to get it out of your system. Or sometimes when you're moving, I have to say that I didn't grieve leaving the facilities that I had so much because it was kind of a tough place to be at. But I do miss the beautiful church that we had. And once in a while, very seldom do I think about it because I was kind of glad that I'm not there anymore. Grieving someone you cannot remember sometimes. Grieving someone who died before you were even born. I can sympathize because I never met my grandparents, and sometimes I wished I could have met my grandparents. So you kind of have to, that's kind of a form of grieving them. Or maybe, like I said a while ago, maybe you had a miscarriage, and it's hard because you're ready to have that child, and all of a sudden you have a miscarriage. I've never had a miscarriage, but I was close to having one, and I thank God every day that my daughter made it through. Death of an ex-husband or an ex-partner. I remember I was engaged to this young man at right after high school, and he went to Vietnam. And I remember when he died, I felt like I needed to go say something, because I grieved him. So I was able to share that I always appreciated him, even though I broke off with him because I didn't think he was the right person. So sometimes we'll even grieve our ex-husbands or ex-spouses. Sometimes we lose something that means a lot to you. Like, for instance, I don't know, one time I had a car for a long time. And that's probably the longest I had ever had that car, and it was a good car. But then I wanted a new car. I remember kind of grieving that car because, you get attached to things, and you get attached to objects that mean a lot to you. But it's not something that you're going to be grieving all the time. It's just that moment. Some don't show enough grieving because the emotions are different for everybody. And some show too much emotions while grieving. Like, you'll see some people crying and crying and crying. They can't stop crying. And then the other person next to them, and that's the mom, is both of they're crying for their mom, but they're crying in a different way. Like, this one here is just crying and crying, and the other one's just sitting there, just looking straight. So they're grieving in a different way. Loss of hopes and dreams for the future, because we all have hopes and we all have dreams for our future, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. Because I have often shared this with you, and I share it a lot, is that I was hoping that my marriage could have worked because I had dreams as a family. I don't grieve that anymore, but I remember when I used to, because I was just, I would think, oh, what if this, what if that, but I don't anymore. Grieving following an abortion. There's women that aborted their children, and later they regret it and they grieve and grieve. But even in that type of environment, that they should be able to just ask for forgiveness and just move forward, because for them to stay grieving concerning that, they might mess up their relationships with their, let's say they have children and they can't get over that when they abort it, it will affect their children or their husband. So they have to learn how to let it go. Grieving can come in different forms at different times. Sometimes you grieve because you find out a person was not who you thought they were. Like, in other words, you really put a lot into that relationship, and at the end of the day, they weren't anything that you expected that they would be. So you have to grieve that and let it go. Grieving a loved one with a substance use or disorder, sometimes you have to let go of those children. In fact, I have ministered to people that their children were out of control, where they went to prison and they were just so addicted to drugs and alcohol. They had to grieve them out of their life, because if not, it was going to destroy them and their relationship, their husband and the wife, or they can even possibly lose their home. So that's a different type of grieving. So, or grieving someone who has experienced a traumatic brain injury, because they're not the same person. And so you have to grieve that and accept it. In everything that we do in life, we have to accept what is there and not dwell on it, and not keep grieving, because grieving, it's not a healthy thing. Or some people, because I used to have people that come to me and ask me if I could minister to their bipolar sister or bipolar daughter. That's a form of grieving, because you don't know how to help them. So you're grieving because you love them, but yet it's for some reason they don't change. So that's a different type of grieving when you have a daughter or a son that has mental illnesses. Or you can grieve someone who has run away. Like, there's children that run away from their home and you can't find them, and sometimes you don't see them for years, and sometimes you'll never see them again. So you have to grieve over that loss. Some people have lost their children and they disappear, and they're wondering if they died or someone killed them, or so they're grieving until some of them get closure, but a lot of them don't. So grieving family separation due to foster care, loss of physical health, that is a time of grieving, because I know when I had 20/20 vision, I was rejoicing all the time. I was so happy. But when I started kind of losing a little bit of my eyesight, I had to grieve that. But I'm not accepting it, because one of the things about me, I will not accept anything negative. You know, if the doctor tells me something, I always say, whose report am I going to believe, God or man? So I always go to God and say, God, you'll give me 20/20 vision again. Loss of independence, that has to do with my eyesight, because I used to be able to get in my car and go anywhere at night or anything, but now I can barely see at night. The death of a coworker, you know, I've had that happen in my life. People that I worked with, I remember his name was David. I'll never forget that. He went out for lunch. I didn't know he had it hard financially, but you know, I got close to David at work, and then all of a sudden someone comes in and says David was in a car accident and he died. Oh, it was so hard. I grieved him for quite a while, because I would see him every day, and he was there talking to me. I was talking to him, and he never shared with me that he was having it as hard as he was. I wished he would have, but the thing is that I grieved him. Some grieve through child abuse. Some grieve through a driver killing their children through an accident, a drunk driver. So we have different things that we grieve for. loss of faith or religious identity, we can grieve over that. So there's different ways of grieving, and there's different people, and so we have our emotions are silent because it's an emotion that's inside of us. So the person grieving is thought incapable of grief with someone with a mental disability or a young child. They don't know how to grieve. So I always say age has nothing to do with death. It happens, sometimes it's expected and other times it's not. So we tend to grieve more when we do expect it, especially if we're very close to that person. And again, like I said a while ago, life is short, but we all have grieved for someone. I know we all have. I know all of you that are listening today, you're probably thinking of the person or whatever I have mentioned today, that you kind of think about it and say, do I still miss them? Am I okay with my emotions? So we all definitely grieve different. There's no doubt about it. But we want to live well. I know that the person that died wants to continue. I remember I ministered to this woman that she had a disabled young daughter, and she only lasted up to 27. And I remember she came in for counseling, and she just couldn't stop thinking about her. That's all she talked about. And then she said, I have her room the same way after a year. I haven't moved anything in the room. I haven't done anything because I can't bear the grief, the pain that I have. So I shared with her that, and this tends to work. I shared with her, do you think that she would want you to be grieving her, or do you think that she would want you to move forward and still love her, and you'll never forget her, but you're turning this into depression, and you're holding on to her? And I said, and what you got to do is just accept and be happy that you had her for 25 years. In other words, thank the Lord that you were able to have her for 27 years. So she started looking at it different, and I was glad about that. And then she went home, and she got rid of a lot of stuff, and moved the bedroom set and everything to a different place so she could let her go, because it's hard to let people go that you love. And I know the most important thing in my life is my family. I do still have goals to succeed. So we have to let go and just let God take over. We don't want to have regrets when someone dies. That's one thing I always tell my kids. Don't ever have regrets. Do whatever you need to do while I'm alive, because I don't want you to have regrets, because a lot of people have regrets, and we're not to have any regrets. We're to continue living. And so you have to ask yourself, what is most important? What is most important for you? What matters in life? If you've been in the hole and do not know how to get out of it, grief is sometimes a very unhealthy sense. It is like a death. So when you experience a great loss, it changes you. You become more aware of what is important to you. So I think that's what we should focus on. But don't forget to buy my books, and I'll see you next week. And God bless you, and may you be healed of your grief.